Thank you for joining us today and the IRM Charities Special Interest Group webinar on risk and resilience. So I'm Steph Jackson. I'm a member of the group committee for the Special Interest Group and also an enterprise risk management consultant at Ecclesiastical Insurance. So what I want to do, I just want to start off with a brief outline of what the Special Interest Group is all about and just cover off the objectives as a reminder. To provide risk practitioners and indeed anyone involved in strategic risk with practical tools such as publications. So do please have a look at the IRM website for full details of many of the free IRM publications that we do have on offer. Lots of comprehensive information on there. So secondly, we're also here to provide useful insights through access to thought-provoking meetings, whether virtually, as everything seems to be done today, or more historically now face-to-face, such as the meeting that we're here to share today. So now I just want to introduce to you our Charity Risk and Resilience presentation, where Angus Roy, Ecclesiastical's Charity Director, is going to walk you through the key findings and conclusions drawn from the Ecclesiastical 2020 Charity Risk Barometer. I'm just going to follow that up just with a short piece looking at adopting an enterprise risk management approach and the roadmap to resilience framework put together by Ecclesiastical. So that might help support you in the mitigation of some of the key challenges that do come out of the risk barometer findings. So if you do have any questions at all, you'll see there's a little questions tab on the toolbar. So if you can enter those in there, and then at the end of the session, we'll cover off as many of those as we can. So now it gives me great pleasure to welcome and hand over to Angus Roy. Angus, I'm just going to turn my camera off now and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. We hope this is going to be informative. I think the first thing I'll do, if you don't mind, is I'll actually turn off my camera because I've got a small screen, but you know, just so you know what I look like, that's me. Right, we will share slides, and this has been recorded. Everything that I'm going to talk about today is going to be in relation to our Charity Risk Barometer. And on the opening slide, you've got an address there, a website address, where you can download it and read it at your leisure. Okay, so if you want a bit more detail, meat on the bones, that's where to go. Okay, if we go to the next slide. I'll be, as Steph said, I'll walk you through the barometer and some high-level findings. And now what I would like to stress is that Ecclesiastical is an insurance company, but we're a little bit different. We're owned by a charitable organisation called All Churches Trust, and our surplus funds are given to All Churches Trust, who then give that out in grants to the third sector and the charity sector. So we are a little bit different, okay? So we have a much stronger affiliation to the charity sector than you might imagine from first glance, being an insurance company. We are also very keen to understand our customers, not only just for our charitable giving, but also from our insurance side. So we always do research within the charity sector, okay? So we're going to share some of those thoughts, and those thoughts are about, we're not standing here wagging fingers saying the charity sector should be doing this. The whole purpose is to share our findings, to spread knowledge across the sector, so that perhaps you can learn things from other organisations and other things that they've found, and it might help formulate and crystallise your thinking for the future and how you're going to move forward, okay? So we just move forward to the next slide. Whenever you do research, there is an element of the environment gets reflected in the findings, okay? Now, 2019, it was probably the top left one, Brexit, but 2020, while there was a lot going on, you can see that Brexit was still rumbling on, Trump was still being Trump, Harry and Meghan went off to Canada initially, and then I think the United States. Harvey Weinstein went to jail, and the Me Too movement continued. In the bottom right, that's California is on fire. They had horrendous fires. And then bottom middle left, that's Australia. They also had horrendous fires. Stock market had a difficult time. and the bottom left one is the horrific explosion in Beirut. So that was the environment, but it's probably no surprise the one in the middle dominated the research findings and figured highly in everybody's thinking. And that was, of course, COVID. So in many respects, while this is the Charity Risk Barometer, it's almost the Charity Risk Barometer stroke COVID, because that was by far and away the biggest influence in people's thinking. One area that wasn't COVID related was the two on the top right. And I will speak further about this, but this was the Black Lives Matter, the shooting of George Floyd, and the sort of worldwide unrest about diversity and equality and all the rest of it. That did figure quite prominently in the research, and we'll touch on that as well. Okay, so we go through to the next slide. This was a very telling exercise. When we did some round tables, so we did quantitative research, and then we moved on to the qualitative research, and we had round tables. And we asked everybody that attended the round tables to, in one word, sum up how they felt about 2020 being in the charity sector. And as you can see there, we have got the whole spectrum from endangered, you know, it's going to come to an end, right through to an inspired. And I think, you know, that is quite a common theme, is that different people and different charities, different organizations are in different places. But there was, you know, let's not be too downhearted. There was that sort of, yes, we're disrupted, but we're also agile and we're also transforming. So there was rewards and upsides. It wasn't necessarily all downside. And I think the other thing that we came through quite strongly was that the topics from 2019, which were keeping people up at night, the topics didn't necessarily change. There wasn't any sort of radical new ones. The topics, the fallout from COVID, some of the topics are the same, but what it did do is it readjusted the priority and the importance of dealing with some issues over other issues. And I think that was put most succinctly by one of the panel members, who said that the risks and the background anxiety became foreground risks and anxiety. So, you know, some things moved forward, other things moved back, but basically the catalyst for the whole feeling within the market was COVID. I think we also felt, and again, going from that endangered to inspire, is that different charities were in different places. Some were very much in survival mode, and I think for some of that continues through today, where others, and a general movement towards, this is the norm. This is the norm as far as we can see, and the world's never going to be the same again, in many respects. So they were trying to do more long-range, forward-looking planning. And I think, again, we've got a very mixed picture there. Necessity, the mother of invention, that was a phrase that was used a lot, and I think, you know, a lot of goods come out of that. You know, digitalization of services, and, you know, anything to do with computers was quite often prior put in a box is too difficult to do, and we'll deal with it tomorrow. But because we had to deal at distance with our service users, the digitalization of services became, you know, what people might have been planning to do in 2 or 3 years, they did in a fortnight. And that was good. But likewise, for every up, there's a down. And to be honest, I think we're in a difficult place in the charity sector, and we've probably got slightly more downs. I think I would take away from this, there is hope, there is time. Charity sector does feel a little bit hanging on by its nails onto the edge of the cliff, but it's not too late. And I'm not trying to be sugarcoat the situation in any shape or form. It's just the feelings that we get back from the charities involved. And I think the one sort of statistic that throws it into sharp focus about this is not a walk in the park, there's still some very hard miles to go, is that 20% of the charities that we talked to felt that they might not be around in 12 months. Now, if you think about it, there's roughly about 200,000 charities in the UK. 20% of that goes, you know, that's 40,000 organisations that might not be here in 12 months' time. So it's a very sober situation. but we've got to be moving through this challenging transformation, agile and inspired, to keep pushing forward. Okay, but not easy. I totally appreciate it's not easy. If we just move on to the next slide, we've almost got our top of the pops slide here. So what we've got is the top 5 concerns over the short term, as they were brought about in 2019, versus the top 20 concerns in 2020, top 6 concerns in 2020. The column on the right, that's an indication of how much COVID drove that thinking as to why that is a significant topic. And if you think they're a little suppressed, that's because I've only included the very strong feelings. There would have been strong feelings sat below that, and it's just the way that it sliced and diced the figures. Okay, I think the most interesting way to do this and most insight is if you actually start with 2019 and see what's happened in 2020, what's happened to the 19 topics versus the 2020 topics. Now, unsurprisingly, if you do any research in the charity sector or the third sector, funding is usually at the top of the list. I think what is ironic is that in 2019, and I've got to put my hand up here because I think I made a statement at the start of the 2019 report where I sort of said we're in unprecedented times. Funding and the charity sector is under great pressure, and the future is going to be tricky. Now, looking back 12 months later in 2020, from 2020 perspective, you might say that I didn't know we were born in some respects, because if we thought the funding was bad in 2019, it is definitely way worse in 2020. And we've probably all seen the reports about a 10 billion shortfall in funding over 2020, or a projected shortfall. And that, yes, I have to keep reminding myself, that's 10 billion, not million, billion. So funding continues to be a major issue. It's a bigger issue than it was, probably no surprise, but for a very different reason. If you cast your mind back to Brexit, that was a topical, but that COVID's kind of drowned that out a bit, and it slid quite far down the ratings. It was still there, and over 2020 we were still in the negotiations and all the rest of it. It's now come to fruition, and I think that's probably one that is, now that it's happened, it's probably going to start creeping back up, depending upon how it plays out over 2021. Okay. The most startling one, and one that shows the most change of direction for me, is that attracting and retaining talent. So back in 2019, lots of charities talking about, how do I keep hold of my staff? I realise I can't pay them as much as the commercial sector. How do I encourage them to develop and all the rest of it? That conversation has been turned entirely on its head, because now it's about employee burnout. It's about, we're now in the world of furloughing and redundancy. It's gone entirely in the different direction. And the people that are on the front line and the people that are in the charity sector, it's not about attracting and retaining, it's about keeping them on their feet. They're doing way more than they've probably ever done, with way less resources than they've ever had. So, that's quite a striking and stark movement in what the conversation's been and where it is now. Okay. You also see that breaching data regs and threat cyber attack made it into the top 6 as well. I think if you look across, it's not even mentioned. My observation in that one is that the fact that it's not mentioned is actually cause for concern. Again, I go back to digitalization of services and all the rest of it. There's been a lot of ad hoc solutions that have been implemented within the charity, and at the same time, while that's going on, we've seen criminals have recognized this, that the security IT systems have changed, adaptive, and more heavier reliance on them. We've seen an increase in the cyber attacks throughout the course of the year, And again, I think this year, again, every year it goes up, but again, this year cyber attacks have gone up exponentially on the prior year. So again, I think that's, while I totally understand while there's, meeting the service user needs are a top priority, I think we just got to, reflect on what's happened over 2020 and cast our minds to those sort of IT related risks. And I'll come back to that. Political stability, it's gone up, and we were a little bit confused because when we talked about political instability in 2019, it was all about hung parliament, Brexit had hit the, it's got bogged down, it wasn't going anywhere, there's Conservative leadership election, all the rest of it, and that we thought well, that's all kind of behind us. Again, the narrative's changed, so the topic's the same, but the narrative's changed. The political instability was very much around COVID guidance, lockdown, not lockdown, trying to negotiate your way through the various guidance material, not helped by the fact that there are devolved governments who had slight variations on a theme of what this guidance was and what you could do and not do. So the political instability was very much more, again, it's that clarity and direction from central government. And I think the other strong feeling is that the government's bandwidth had been totally saturated and taken up by the need to deal with COVID, and considerations to what the impact was on the third sector and the charity sector, and what its voice had to say was possibly, not at the forefront because they saw it as other things needed addressed first and foremost. Okay. If we then sort of turn to 2020 and the ones that we've sort of missed out, the other one that's quite striking is meeting the service users' needs. Now, again, that when we look back over our prior years' research, the meeting the service users' needs was there, but it wasn't very high up. And when you take a step back and think, well, surely the whole purpose of being a charity is to meet your service users' needs, so that should almost be the top priority. I think in prior years, it was almost viewed as a hygiene factor sort of thing. It was like stating the obvious, so nobody really plumped for that. It was the funding and the tactic and training staff. I think what COVID brought to light, and with the social distancing and the lockdown, was that meeting the service users' needs was not straightforward. And also that the needs of those service users changed quite radically, potentially. What they needed in the way of services yesterday was not necessarily what they needed now. And I will talk about it, but again, there's quite a dramatic change in the way the landscape fell out. Finally, on this slide, then, we've got diversity. And again, as I said, it was not driven by COVID. It was Black Lives Matter, killing George Floyd. And I think this was something that had been bubbling under the surface in the prior surveys, but that environment and those rioting and demonstrations and all the rest of it really brought this to the forefront. And I think while we've seen more pressure possibly put on commercial entities about sort of being blacklisted for the past, the history of the organisation and the way they conduct themselves now, this is definitely throwing up real concern, because it's like, well, they're doing it sort of to commercial organisations now, then the charitable organisations are probably going to be next. And there is a real desire and concern about tackling this issue. It's not an issue that's going to go away. Coincidentally, we had to reposition some of our research because we worked with getting on board on some research. And we started the research on the basis of diversity being about age. And we had to rapidly reposition that because this whole area sort of mushroomed out, and then we realized that we weren't really addressing the right areas and issues. And some of that research, when we did talk about diversity and trustees, was actually quite somber reading. We had a number of sort of feedbacks whereby people that would have been in sort of BAME community who had become trustees had quite often given it up because they felt they were tokenism, they weren't listened to. They were just there to make up the numbers and sort of thing. So again, that's a big challenge for the sector moving forward. On an upside, what I'm happy to say is that Getting On Board did produce a guide on how to become a trustee. They'd done one in the previous year about how charities can recruit trustees. But we sponsored them this year to do it from the other direction. How does a trustee become, how does somebody that wants to become a trustee join a charity board, and how do they go about that? And again, with a very heavy emphasis on improving the diversity of that charity board, also reflecting the society and the service users within which it serves. Okay, so we move on, do a little bit more digging in. So what I'm going to try and do here is what were the concerns of the charitable organisations, and then the adapt and survive bit is more about what are they talking about, and it might give you some ideas. Okay, so as I mentioned, the challenge funding 10 million. 20% said they might not be here in a year's time, but not only that, 48% expect their reserves to be depleted within a year. Now, we did this research sometimes about 3-4 months ago. Those reserves are just depleting all the time. So yeah, it's a very worrying situation. I think what's possibly more worrying is that 34% thought this is going to be a long-term problem. And in some respects, the worst is actually still to come. And what they were talking to there was that, you know, emergency funding for some of the services will stop. The furlough scheme will stop. Brexit is a bit of an unknown, what the impacts of that will be. Another sort of question mark on the horizon. And then the overwhelming thing is that if we hit austerity in 2008, you know, 2008 was bad, again, don't get me wrong, but we've now got debt that is equal to 1940s when we came out of the Second World War. There seems to be an inevitable period where this debt will need to be paid back, and we will be returning to a period of austerity, probably more severe than what it would be in 2008. And what does that mean for the funding of my organisation, and how can I expect to survive in that environment? Okay, so having thought about that, we got to talking about, well, what do we do about it? How do we adapt? How do we survive? And the big thing is probably not a massive surprise, but it's the diversifying of the fronts. I think there was a general sort of two camps. I think, and there's been an article in The Guardian about it today, that if you were in a frontline service associated to the NHS or the care sector, then you probably had, you know, you were probably getting funds relatively easy to everyone else. If you were more remote from that, then you're probably you're really struggling for funds, and that's got to be considered in the thinking as well. What they did find is that legacies and direct debits had actually been very stable throughout the entire period. So if you're not in that area, you know, that's not an area where you try and get your funding from, then that's possibly an area to move into. Again, like a lot of the situations we find us going online with campaigns and appeals and virtual events, they were seen as the way forward, because, you know, while the vaccine's on its way sort of thing, this does not seem like a short-term problem. And a lot of the charities are talking about looking and exploring new revenue streams via these kind of mechanisms. What they did find in those that put their toe in the water, the virtual events actually, in some respects, and I know a number of organisations have commented around this, virtual events in some respects actually worked better than having physical events, because there wasn't the additional cost and time associated with travelling to the event, having a hotel and all the rest of it. What they found is that their attendance levels actually went up. But on the flip side, they also found that they couldn't really charge the same amount for the physical, you know, for the virtual event. But then probably the costs were a bit lower as well. I must admit, I attended an award ceremony in Northern Ireland virtually, just before Christmas. And I must admit, I was a little bit apprehensive, because it felt like I was going to have a 3-hour Zoom call. And I must admit, the event was brilliant. It was amazing what they'd done. They had basically turned the hotel into a virtual environment. You had a table. You could speak to people on your table. They had people on, for want of a better expression, on the stage. And they kept things moving. They had musicians, they had a comedian, they had the actual awards themselves, and they kept the whole thing moving. And I must admit, it was really good. It kept things moving. In some respects, it was possibly more entertaining than sitting in a hotel grand hall. So, you know, something to think about. I'll just mention it now. I've put a name of a company called Tap Simple at the bottom. They've got a platform that, you know, you're free to go and speak to them and all the rest of it, you know, but I just try to make people aware there are companies out there, and that's one that I know that's Tap Simple, and they'll do everything from ticketing, collecting the money, sort of like sweepstakes on the night, you know, they buy a bingo ticket and then they'll have a pull out prize. They've got all the technology to actually run the event, and they've also got the back end to deal with gifting and everything as well. So, you know, if that helps, great. The other thing that we found with a number of charities was that they were sort of, some respects accidentally, but they diversified into trading arms. What they found was that what they did for their service users, they couldn't do physically anymore, so they'd gone online. But what they also find is that the services that they provided for their service users or their beneficiaries were as equally attractive to those that were in the commercial sector, and they would be willing to pay for those services. So what they did is that they pivoted some of their activities to for fee basis, and what they did with the money that they charged for is they then subsidized and helped their charitable activities. I think probably the best example I've got of that was again, it was in Northern Ireland, randomly. The charity had been set up to support mental health after a gentleman very tragically took his own life. So a number of his friends set up a charity, and they run support activities on mental health. They had a corporate partner, and everything. They had a great relationship with the corporate partner. And what sparked it off is that with the remote working from home and homeschooling and all the rest of it, the corporate partner sort of said, my office staff, you know, their stress levels have gone up. We feel we need a bit of your mental health training and guidance in our company. And we'll actually pay for that, because it doesn't matter what we do, we're going to have to pay for it. And we'd far rather you, as our charitable partner, we'd rather you had the money than anyone else. And that snowballed from there. And I think it's a really good example of just sort of repositioning what you already do. So yeah, I mean, that's the sort of things, the diversification, the online, the virtual, trading arms, they were sort of the things that people were investigating, okay? The other thing that is on the bottom of that slide as well is Ecclesiastical as a company feel that we've kind of got a moral duty to help as well, being owned by a charitable organisation. So we've set up a resource base for the charity fundraising hub. And on there is a variety of material that you can use, but we're also running a series of 5 webinars. If you go on there, you can register for the 5 webinars. Unfortunately, the last webinar is on Tuesday or Monday of next week, but don't panic, they're all recorded. So, you know, I'd encourage you to go and have a look. Okay, move on to employee burnout. Again, I think we kind of touched on this, 2/3 increased stress issues. You know, why are we stressed? Well, we're doing more or less for those issues that I talked about earlier, you know, the furloughing, redundancies, the drop in funding. But on the flip side as well, there's mass increase in demand for these services. So we're trying to do more with less resource. And that's obviously going to build up into stress. In addition, on top of that, everybody's working in new ways, everybody's having to adapt and change. So we've got new work processes. The skill set that I had to do my job yesterday might be a totally different skill set from how I'm doing it now. You might be cooped up. I don't think I've stepped foot out of my dining room in the last 10 months. It's easy to feel remote, it's easy to feel isolated, not disconnected. So again, that's adding to the stress. And the big one is, and I know we're kind of flip-flopping in and out of lockdown, not lockdown, is the other one is that it was recognised that there was definitely a fear factor of returning to the office or the workplace or wherever it is that you undertake your activities. There was definite nervousness about, do I want to put myself at risk? Do I want to put my family at risk? So there were big issues that flowed through. I think the one thing that I was a little bit surprised at as well is that some of the organisations actually found that it wasn't the frontline staff that were under the cosh the most. It was actually things like HR and IT. So if you've got mass digitalisation of your services, that's put a lot of pressure on the IT department. And obviously you've got to work through all this COVID guidance and people not feeling great. They're all HR issues. They felt quite under pressure. Okay. So again, adapt and survive. How do we deal with it? Well, everybody agreed, we're in unprecedented times. There's no playbook to pull out the bottom drawer. This is unprecedented, but we've got to be flexible and sensitive. And we've got to recognise the things that, the homeschooling and, those sorts of issues are now impinging. A great phrase is avoid the living at work scenario. So, your home, your safe haven, is now also your office or wherever it is that you conduct whatever activities you're doing. I think the other thing is standard office hours, 9 to 5. Is that relevant when we're trying to squeeze all these other things into our lives now? That needs a bit of thinking about. And as I said, the return to work was also seen as a bit anxious, and we had quite a good anecdote whereby the health and safety officer had gone from being Mr. Killjoy, the classic image, if you're going to play conkers, you've got to have a hard hat and safety glasses. That was kind of how he was viewed in the organisation. But when it came to returning to the office, he became the hero. He became, everybody listened to him so much more, took on board what he was saying so much more, got more involved in the process of designing policies and procedures and safe working practices and being COVID secure and all the rest of it. So there's a complete transformation of attitude to health and safety, and he did actually say that at one stage they were not refusing, but they were uncomfortable about coming back into the office unless he put out more hazard tape to show that you couldn't sit in these desks, you couldn't go down that aisle, and all the rest of it. So he sort of said, it was pleasing that people had actually started taking it seriously, collaborated, worked together, and all the rest of it. Okay. People did talk a lot about services, things that they'd either tweaked or introduced. Flexible hours of working, 75%, that was the top one, understandably so. 52% said that they definitely felt the need to absolutely review the wellbeing policies, because the wellbeing policy was designed to deal with working in a manner that no longer existed. So they had to make it relevant to today's activities, not to yesterday's activities. And 46% went for counselling services, paid phone line. Now, again, top tip here. I think counselling is great and all the rest of it, but don't forget your insurance policy. We provide, if you buy a policy with us, we actually provide free counselling service, to helpline service, not only for your employees, but for your immediate family as well. And that comes as standard. So, always think laterally before you pay for anything on that front. And the other big thing was about the need, this adapt and survive was also about lots of things had changed, and there was definite need to revisit training and make sure that people felt supported and had the skills they needed to do the job now. Again, the job they're doing now, not the job they used to do pre-COVID. Okay. I think on the upside, though, is when we did talk through this subject, that there were a number of unexpected upsides. Because they were working in new ways, they discovered skill sets that employees had that no one knew about, because they never had to use them before. And I think the other thing was there was a definite feeling that there was a bit of a Dunkirk spirit, or the Blitz spirit, the Blitz or whatever. They felt that while they always had a common purpose, it was a little bit back to the wall. everybody's doing the best they can. We're all working together. We're all using our resources best we are. We're collaborating. We're talking more, and we've got a common purpose and focus, which increased the general sort of sense of well-being and enrichment to what they were doing. I think that's the other thing, is that because people had been given new opportunities to try, whether it be a new role or a new way of operating, some of them did feedback that they actually felt that their job was enriched as well. Okay, some other flip sides as well is that with this adapting workplace, they did find that the reach of the charity had increased, and also that some of the costs had reduced as well. But I think there was one of the closing comments from one of the participants, I think was a very sanguine point, is that we've got to take people as individuals, and they had comments about, this is not the job that I was recruited to do. This is way outside my comfort zone, and I think it's about being that flexible. Again, it's about finding the right people in the right role, and skilling them. And if they're not there, but they want to get there, then skilling them up to do that. Okay. We move on to the next slide, meeting the service needs, and this is the one that's it's gone from a hygiene factor to almost absolutely critical, because we can't operate in the same way that we did before. When we sat about on the challenges, we went from the initial acute short-term anxiety, overwhelmed. We've got a quote down there from Louise. I just don't know if my charity is relevant anymore. What are we doing? What have we got to offer faced with COVID and all that's going on? And again, 42% not concerned about not being able to meet the service users' needs. I think the thing was, though, is that probably they quite quickly moved through that anxiety. And realised that, yes, the needs of today are not the same as the needs of yesterday as far as our service users are concerned. They also appreciated that the service users' needs had probably increased due to the effects of COVID, whether that be isolation, increased poverty, increased domestic abuse, or anything that had resulted from the situation. They did appreciate that, but I think they all came to the conclusion, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but we need to get on with it. This is the new norm, and to do nothing would be a fallacy. What we need to do is make the best of what we've got, and we need to move on with this. Okay. By far, the thing that they said gave them the biggest problems was the social distancing. Not all charities are about people, but charities are generally people focused, even if the charitable objective is not about people. But it's a people industry. People want to interact, they want to collaborate and all the rest of it. So social distancing shut that down to a large extent, at least in the early stages. But as I've sort of alluded to before, that over time they felt that evolved, delivering services remotely, delivering new services, delivering different services, digital solutions. There has been this mass innovation and digitalization that's occurred over the last 12 months, which, there's not many silver linings, but, that innovation is definitely one of the silver linings of where we find ourselves. And I apologize, I'm not even sure I can call it a silver lining, but I hope you get the sentiment that it's, it's improved the situation. The other thing that they found was access to premises was very ad hoc, very different. Some councils, if they rent premises, or some landlords and all the rest of it, would have very differing approaches to how, A, could you get in, and B, if you did get in, how many could you have in, and how did you operate? And across this, if you've got a multiple site organisation, how do I deal with all this? And I think the other challenge moving on is that there was a feeling that, and a totally understandable, it was needs must, it was a piecemeal patchwork of solutions and adaptations and all the rest of it. And I think, looking, that was about the here and now, looking forward, how's this all going to hang together? Is it sustainable? Is it doing what it needs to? And lastly in there, and this is one that I do find very sort of depressing, is that it threw up the digital divide. that very much, when you got to this sort of mass digitalization, there's winners and losers. But what it did bring to the fore was that, and it was in two camps. It was charities that weren't able to digitize because they just didn't have the money or the resources or the existing tech, but also the service users. Don't assume that everybody's got a smartphone. Don't assume that everybody's got a tablet. And if they haven't got one, how am I going to interact with my service users? So that was quite a sanguine point that was brought out. Okay. So moving forward, what did they say? What are they looking to do moving forward? And I think the main thing was keep innovating. We've achieved, as a sector, you've achieved amazing things in difficult circumstances, and there's more to be achieved. So keep innovating, decide what to keep, decide what to get rid of, decide what you can do, and take the learnings from this, from the past, and project it into the future. So we got diversification of services, what's new, what's existing, and just keep that evolving and reflecting the needs of your time. Okay. The last thing on there is that someone sort of said that, well, we are a people organization, and sometimes digital is not appropriate. It's just not the way to deliver the service that we need to deliver. But what they did say is they felt under great pressure because everybody else was doing it. We're under pressure to do it ourselves. And I think that was the message, is that it's got to be right for your organization. It's got to be right for your charity. Okay. The last thing that I do sort of want to say on this, and the digitization meeting service user needs, is that I do strongly think that as a sector we need to look back round, and we need to start revisiting things like GDPR, cybersecurity, and safeguarding. And safeguarding, I mean safeguarding online, because you might have done something in a community centre, now you're doing it by Zoom. Have we thought through, what is the potential for grooming? How do we monitor grooming and all that sort of thing? So that digitalisation has been fantastic. It's given great opportunity, but we need to go back and revisit the risks associated with it. Okay, so we go on to the next slide. Sorry, I'm burning Steph's time here badly. What we've sort of basically come to is that we have a plethora of challenges. They're not necessarily changed, but it's just some are more important than others now than what they used to be. I think the general move was, while some charities were still in the survive mode, I think as a sector in general, this is the new norm. Everybody's trying to look over the horizon, trying to move from a patchwork quick fix to a more holistic, joined up view. And I think that is a challenge, and for some it will be more challenging than others. But what they all agreed was that where possible, we need to start sort of looking forward and start building for the future, and dare I say it, build back better. I think what they all agreed was that it could be very overwhelming, very daunting when you sort of look at this plethora of stuff. But if you plan and you get organised, then it becomes easier. And I think we do have a stat that kind of reflects that. So we asked the charities that had a BCP if they thought it helped, and 82% of them said yes, it definitely helped. It got them through. So it just sort of highlighted the importance and the practicality when it all comes to fruition about that planning piece. So we go on to the next slide. This is where I'm going to sort of start handing over to Steph, but this is kind of what they're looking for. It's a confusing world. There's lots of stuff in there. What we need to do is we need to bring structure and order to the chaos sort of thing. So they're looking to put, I mean, you guys can tell us, but they're looking to have this roadmap, if you like, start looking ahead, get some structure around it, look at the priorities, what's the severity, what's the likelihood, what's the ups, what's the downs, and start building plans to consolidate on what they've learned and what they've endured, and making sure that they're resilient going forward. Okay, so sorry, Steph, I've talked for a very long time. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Angus. Well, to be fair, I think it was well worth those extra minutes because lots of useful insight there. I'm sure everyone will agree. So thank you. So now we're going to move on to enterprise risk management. So I'm going to start by just revisiting the concept of enterprise risk management and what makes it slightly different to our traditional approach. Then I'm going to move on in the time that we've got left just to have a look at our roadmap to resilience framework, just to introduce a new model that might support you. So we've got the Institute of Risk Management definition of enterprise risk. So enterprise risk is an integrated and joined up approach to managing risk across an organisation and extended network. So what we're finding during these times of greater complexity and uncertainty in an evolving risk environment is that a traditional risk approach doesn't quite hit the mark. So we need to think differently and look at risk from a strategic level to see organisational risk as a whole and not just in one part of an organisation. So enterprise risk management is a framework to help you look at things differently so you can make strategic and operational decisions and support the achievement of your organisational objectives. So it's more looking at risk universally across the organisation. So rather than looking at it siloed in perhaps different functions, for example, looking at how many people and adequately staffed in an IT function, it's looking at adequately staffed across a whole organisation, so you're getting a better view on what those key risks look like. So something might look key in one area, but if you look at it universally across an organisation, it might not be as important. It might not be one of those things that's keeping you awake at night. So risk management as well, and IRM, it's part of the good governance. So it's basically about doing the right thing to support your organisation to be successful in achieving your objectives. So just going to revisit the difference between the traditional risk management and the IRM approach. So what we see is enterprise risk management mostly focuses on those uninsurable risks and those things that continue to keep us awake at night that we can't insure and put to bed, if you like. It's multi-dimensional, unlike traditional risk management, so we can often apply a number of different lenses and explore the risks. So we can look at impacts on not just a financial basis, but also look at how many customers are impacting, reputational scale of impact, regulatory scale of impact as well. And kind of revisiting the concept, it looks at the entire organisation. So we're not just looking at pockets of risk here and there, we're looking at how it spans universally in that holistic view. It's very proactive as well. So we're not just reacting to events or focusing on specific areas. It's proactive and it's continuous. It's a cycle, if you like. So we're preempting and we're focusing on those risks before they occur, but that gives us a better picture and a better understanding of the level of risk that we're carrying to make us more informed about those key decisions and to seize opportunities as well, of course. So it's part of the culture, part of the mindset, and how we embed that into the forefront of everything that we do and into the business's usual activity. Again, it's an enabler to support change, kind of saying there that we've got a better grasp by looking at it more proactively across the broader organisation, a better grasp of the level of risk that we're carrying, so we're in a better position to make informed decisions, seize opportunities ahead. Okay, so what are the benefits? So we've got some key benefits here as well. So it gives us a greater understanding of our total risk profile, supports the achievement of objectives, better informed decision making, as you know the level of risk that you're carrying, enhanced performance because you're minimising disruption, better service outcomes for customers, stakeholders, good governance and greater assurance. So that's greater assurance internally, to the board, to third parties, customers. Competitive advantage, we know what we're dealing with here, so we can make those short, sharp, quick decisions and quick moves. Future proofing as well, we're preempting, we're horizon scanning, we know what's kind of coming ahead. And the big piece as well around protecting reputation and ever growing risk. We've seen that in some of the findings that Angus has just shared there. So great for protecting risk. So enterprise risk management approach, so basic process, got it broken down into 5 stages here. We've got the risk identification, which is about getting the right people around the table, your subject matter experts, undertaking a review of those core risks around your strategy and organisational objectives, Also the horizon scanning piece, looking for those emerging risks. Just while we're on that, the IRM as well has actually brought out a recent publication on emerging risks, which is available via the webpage. We move on after we've identified the risks to risk analysis. So this is really focusing on the background of the risk. So we can have a look at those causes, the consequences, to make a fully informed assessment of the risk. So we move on to prioritisation. As part of that, we're going to undertake that assessment. So we're going to be looking at likelihood. We're going to be looking at impact, whether that's financially, reputationally, from a customer impact, from a regulatory, and we can use which one of those kind of lenses is kind of holds the heaviest weight to gauge a strong assessment of that as well. So move on to mitigation. That's around having our the right mitigation strategy in place. We often talk about the 4 T's here, whether we're going to treat the risk, tolerate, transfer outside, or whether we're going to terminate and stop doing that process altogether if we are carrying too much risk in doing so. And then we move on to our risk monitoring. So this is our ongoing review, our ongoing assessment. So we talked about IRM being continual activity. We've got that ever-changing riskscape. We've got internal change, we've got external change. So it's ensuring that you're continually revisiting those risks, assessing them. One assessment from one quarter might look different to another quarter. So it's that ongoing monitoring. Also, we might see some key risk indicators coming in as well to really show the visibility of the journey of those risks. Also be looking at typically any risk crystallizations that we have, and all that insight can feed back in to those assessments. So that's your cycle. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move on to our roadmap to business resilience. So using the principles of enterprise risk management and strategic risk-based approach, we at Ecclesiastical have created a roadmap to business resilience model. It's essentially a planning framework to support organisations to recover from COVID-19 and ongoing business disruptions, of course the challenges it continues to bring even now as well. So it sets out the steps to support the return to the norm while keeping risks and opportunities at the forefront. So one thing I'd say as well, kind of appreciate everybody has been working through recovery plans and has had kind of models in place and been attacking that kind of resilience piece. But what we find with this as well, people have still been having a go and utilising the templates that we've got available. It's useful just to sense check the work you've been doing, pick up anything that might have been missed. So I recommend it is available on our website at Ecclesiastical if you want to have a look at this. So we've got the roadmap. It's got 3 areas of focus. It's got 4 key enablers or checklists that we've got, and 5 strategic steps. So we just think 3, 4, 5. So Ecclesiastical have also created a number of guidance documents and tools to support the use of the roadmaps. They're all available on the Ecclesiastical website. So framework will help lay the foundations for long-term success with a greater understanding of your total risk profile, visibility of your capability and capacity to manage risk, change, and can support you in unveiling opportunities as well. So kind of mentioned before, these tools and templates are all on the Ecclesiastical website. They're intended as a starting point as well, and they can be adapted to each organisation's specific context. So I'm just going to quickly look at, just conscious of time, we'll just quickly look at each stage before we take any questions. It's got 3 areas of focus, provide you with the opportunity to step back and look at your strategy, operations and workforce with the objective of identifying the impact, actions to recover, opportunities and risk the pandemic or other events may have had on your organisation. So we do this by using the business impact review document. So that's also on the website. So that walks you through key questions to understand what has happened, what was or is the impact, and where are the opportunities and risks. So on the online template, there is actually a little example tab which helps users in the completion of the document as well. So we move on to the 4 key enablers. We've got governance and risk, finance, community and stakeholders, and technological capability. So our guidance here is in the form of a checklist around each of the 4 key enablers, which provides you with a number of questions designed to help you start planning your recovery and the best use of resources. So the best approach here is to get together with key members of your organisation, senior management, your SMEs and subject matter experts around the table, share the business impact review you've already completed on the previous step, then work through as a group to complete the questions from the 4 key enabler checklists. This will reveal what is currently in place and what actions are possible as well. So finally, we've got the 5 strategic steps. So this stage of the model takes the information you collated from your business impact review and your key enabler checklist, and it puts it in a wider, more strategic context. So further question set available to support this step helps to sense check recovery plans. So looking at the strategic steps, we've got position, perspective, plan, projects and preparedness. So take the information you've collected so far and put it in a wider, more strategic context. Work through the 5 strategic steps and supporting questions. You can see the 5 steps here. We've got position, perspective, plan, projects and preparedness. So if you use the templates available to identify your new medium-term strategic priorities, record any actions you need to undertake, develop your new strategic plan and assess any risks associated with its delivery. So this will ensure the approach you've identified will work and is appropriate at this moment in time, or if it's in need of some further refinement. So just a quick recap. So we're saying 3, 4, 5, that's the key. So we've got the 3 areas of focus. Think about your strategy, operations and workforce. Assess the impact that COVID has had on your organisation together with opportunities and risks. We've got the 4 key enablers, where we're working through the key enabler checklist with relevant team members to support your plans for recovery. Then we've got the 5 strategic steps. Look at your recovery plans in context to help you agree your strategic priorities moving forward. So if you want to try it yourself to build greater business resilience in light of COVID-19, to achieve your strategic priorities moving forward, as I say, appreciate people have got programs and models and frameworks working in place, but it might support you in giving your way of working a quick sense check or just helping to identify anything that you missed. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We've now got a couple of minutes left just to field any questions you might have for Angus or I. So I'm just having a look now in the question field. I can't see any at the minute. Just give it a minute.
Don't be bashful.
Yeah, just all right, a couple of minutes just to see if there's any coming through. More than happy to answer those.
While we're waiting, I noticed that one of our panelist members, you know who you are, Joseph, is actually on the webinar. So I just want to say thank you, Joseph, for helping us with our research. Much appreciated.
So I'm just trying to extend the question box now. I can only see one line of it. Will it come down? I think there's a couple coming in now. Angus, can you see it from your side?
Sorry,
I think there's a couple of points coming in. I think Michael and Kim, it just won't expand at the minute.
I can't see anything.
Okay, so Michael's just asking, yeah, Michael's just asking if the presentation is available later. Yes, of course, Michael, it will. We're going to get that uploaded and we'll be sharing that recording as well.
Frantic clicking in the background.
I know, I think this one's from Michael as well. We've got another point here, diverse boards. Just bear with me. I don't think technology is on my side for the questions. Diverse boards is to stop groupthink and improve the effectiveness of decision making. It is not about corporate social responsibility, which is tokenism.
Yeah, I totally agree on that one. You know, it's kind of been proven that the more viewpoints you have on that board, probably the better the decisions are going to be.
Okay, we've got another point, is that from Michael as well? Diversification is a basic form of risk management which finance and investment understands, but rarely is given to the same importance in IRM. Another good point there. Thank you, Michael. We've got another one. Are any charities looking seriously at merging with other charities with similar objectives?
I mean, again, it's a little bit anecdotal, but there is some sort of, if you track the media and some research, traditionally there's been mergers have been very, very, very low in the sector, and there's always been an encouragement to collaborate and merge where possible to maximise funds. I wouldn't say that we've got a massive uptick, but there is definitely an uptick. Particularly, I think it was the Small Charity Coalition mentioned this, that there's definitely been an uptick in inquiries about how do I go about this, and that's probably as a result of the reducing funds. Trying to come together, serve the same, basically the ideal solution is you've got the same service users with the same needs in the same geographical area, rather than two organisations doing it. Can we not collaborate, at least collaborate, if not merge, to provide better services in a more cost-effective manner? So yes, we have seen an increase, but it's not a sort of exponential increase. It's definitely something that, and I think as time goes on, it will become more of a consideration for many organisations.
So that was from Kim. I'm just seeing if there's any more. They're difficult to pick up in this tiny box.
I wish I could help you, Steph, but unfortunately my box is just empty.
Oh, it's fine. Hang on, I think we've got one more. So just asking for a reminder of the link for the documents in the final slide. If that's the final slide referring to our roadmap to resilience in ecclesiastical, they're on the ecclesiastical website, ecclesiastical.com, where you'll be able to reach through. But we'll be able to share that link as well. Hopefully we can send that out to attendees today. But if you could go onto the ecclesiastical website, it's easy to find on there in the risk management support section.
Okay.
Let's see if there's. Can't see any more coming through at the minute, unless it's just slow. Right.
That mouse is taking a pounding.
Yeah. I think we're there, but if there are any more questions, do get in touch by the special interest group, and we'll be happy to come back to you on those.
Okay.
Okay, so we want to say another big thank you for joining us today as part of the special interest group, and many thanks for Angus for joining us as well and sharing that useful insight.
I think from my perspective, I'd just like to thank the IRM for giving us the opportunity and the floor to speak to your members, and also thank you to the members for listening. Hopefully it was of use, it was of interest. But if anybody wants to get in touch, I'm on LinkedIn or anything like that, if they want to discuss further.
Okay, I think we'll wrap it there. We've gone 4 minutes over, so we'll let you get back now. But thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll see you at the next special interest group event. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.